Professor Kumar, and the two both elegant and eloquent students, representatives on the dais. Firstly, it's a real pleasure for me to be here today. I must say that this is the first time I'm actually going to talk about Happiest Minds, at least to a certain extent in terms of sharing the values of our company also as I go along. And it is unusual because I'm in a stage where I've announced the creation of Happiest Minds, but we've also said that we'll allow some time to launch the company while I build up a team, and that's exactly what I'm doing right now. The intention is to launch the company by September. It really is a pleasure for me to be with you today. I do hope that when you look back many years later, you'll find that the words I've said have made a difference. My theme today is fulfilling your personal potential. And all of you are about to embark in a while. Some of you maybe sooner than the others, maybe the rest of you about a year or so from now. Embark on your own careers and your lives ahead. If I had to reduce my advice actually to a single sentence, I'd really say that keep your heads in the clouds and your feet planted firmly on the ground. And by this I'm really saying that you must have dreams, but your dreams should be grounded in reality. At the same time, it's important for you to know that your dreams should not be bound by today's possibilities. You should reset them as you go ahead in your lives. For example, at the start of his career, could Mr. Narayan Murthy ever have known that he would go on to create India's most respected IT company? Could Mr. Madhavan Nair ever have known that he would lead India's first successful mission to the moon? So these were possibilities they could not have imagined as they began their careers. And as those possibilities became feasible, they reset their ambitions and their goals. Personal fulfillment is also linked to self-awareness. I think it's very important that you should be clear what you want to be. I'm going to suggest to you that you think about a question. It's unusual for people to even think about that in an early stage in your lives. I find that when I ask this question, even of audiences where people have been working for many years, I find that they've really not actually given it a conscious thought. And the question is to ask yourself, do I have a well-defined purpose for my life? Each of us was sent to the world with some specific objective and goal. And what should that goal be in your own life? And once you're aware of that, you ask yourself this question in terms of self-awareness. I think that will also lead you directly into a path of fulfilling your personal potential, because then you know what you want to be. And you'll find that people who don't actually consciously do this, Clayton Christensen, I'm sure many of you have heard of him. He's one of the best known professors out of Harvard, but he's also an intensely spiritual person. He's the author of books like The Innovator's Dilemma, The Innovator's Solution. And he says that when people don't think about these aspects, they invariably find that they really may have a lot of regrets which they don't then have time to be able to rectify. And they overinvest, perhaps in their careers, but underinvest in all the things that are important to them. Let me, for a moment, talk to you about what I see as some of the major factors which lead to success. The first thing is that I do believe that high achievement individuals strive for excellence in all that you do. They have high aspirations, they're accountable, and they're action-oriented. And high aspirations do not mean setting grandiose goals, but you set stretch targets, and then you continuously raise the bar. And I think that's the difference between, I'd say, somebody who's aiming to be better, that you reach one goal, then you raise the bar towards the next goal. I used the word stretch just now in context of achievement, and I do see this as important in everything that you would do. I came across some beautiful lines from Sri Ravi Shankar, which I thought I'd share with you. Stretching sound is music, stretching movement is dance, stretching smile is laughter, stretching mind is meditation, stretching life is celebration, stretching devotee is God, stretching feeling is ecstasy. And in a more mundane and down-to-earth environment, I'd say stretching yourself in terms of how far you can go is really the path to success. At this stage, let me be somewhat negative and talk about failure. And I'd like to sort of caution you in advance as some of the reasons why I see leaders and managers fail in their careers. Paradoxically, I'd say there are about as many failures due to overstretching as there may be due to understretching. So some people try to accomplish too much. They don't quite realize that firstly that life I used to think was a marathon. I realized as you went along it's much more complex, much more demanding. It's a marathon with a series of sprints interspersed. You've got to be able to have the fun, the enjoyment, the stamina to last the distance. Work lives are going to get longer, work lifespans are getting longer, and therefore you've got a long runway ahead of you. And I think you need to prepare yourself for the same, one step at a time, and don't burn the candles at both ends and therefore burn yourself out. And that also is a big danger as people embark on their careers. The second reason I talk about reasons for failure is the fear of failure and therefore the inability to take appropriate business risks. Business is all about taking risks. For those of you who will incorporate into corporate careers, you have to be able to take measured steps to be able to get a balanced risk-reward ratios, and clearly everything will not succeed. There will be failures. You should be able to pick yourself up, demonstrate another capability when such a failure occurs, and that is your own resilience. And sometimes those failures are a great opportunity to test out your own resilience. And therefore learn from your successes and your failures, but don't be afraid of those failures. I think the third type of reason for failure at times can be that sometimes success comes too easily, and that can lead into complacency. There's such wonderful opportunities today that you may actually find that you've achieved much more than you even expected to do. I must certainly say for my own career, I'd never have visualized the sort of opportunities which arose. And today those opportunities are many, many times what existed at that time. And therefore, if that early success comes, you have to ensure that you don't let complacency go to your head. Don't let that success turn your head around to say that, in a sense, you've been able to accomplish something which others haven't, and then you begin to rest on those laurels. Coming down to the more people aspects of success and your journey through life, I think the most important thing, and one reason for failure at times, is when people put themselves before the team and the organization. Remember, it's not necessary for anyone to lose for you to win. And it is possible to be very nice and very successful. It is not necessary for you to claw your way to the top, but rather be like the cream which floats to the top. And most importantly, you have to be able to leverage and multiply your own output through the teams that you deliver. It's what you get out of the team which is going to be far more important as you advance in your careers in terms of what you're able to accomplish and not directly what you yourself are doing. The fourth reason for failure is that persons tend to be either good managers or good leaders. I'm not sure how much of management literature you've been exposed to, but what annoys me a lot is that whenever people write books on leadership, they seem to say that it is more important than management. Or a lot of phrases get generated by saying we are under-led and over-managed. To me, I think these are two sides of a coin. I think a successful person in a business world, or for that matter in any, and it could be again in the social sector, in the education sector, I think you have to be both a good leader and a good manager. Leadership is about vision, it's about motivating others, it's about empowering others and mentoring. Management is about planning, measuring, deciding and executing. And these are skills that you have to develop. There are two sides of a coin. They're certainly not mutually exclusive. And again, as I said, a prerequisite for success is to be both a good manager and a good leader, and of course, a good human being. Finally, the fifth and the most important of reasons for failure, I think, is a mismatch between a person's skills and the requirements of a job. And when I talked about self-awareness, sometimes it's important to ask yourself, what is it that I believe that I'm going to be able to enjoy doing? What is it that's going to give me greater satisfaction? Not in terms of saying what particular compensation a given job brings. It's when you look back at that that you get enthused, that work becomes like a hobby. You're able to throw your best into it, brings the best out in you. I tell people to take their decisions with their head, their heart, and their gut. The head is really gives you all the pros and cons. You could go up, if you're talking of a business decision, you get onto a whiteboard, you put down the pros and the cons. More often than not, the decision will jump out at you, the right decision. It's not that anyone is taking the decision, it's really the logic which takes the decision. However, there may be many other decisions of a more personal nature where you need to be able to bring in, and there could be emotions involved. And that's when you bring in your heart. When you ask, what is it that I believe I'm going to enjoy? What is it that's going to bring happiness in my life and happiness in the lives of others surrounding me? And finally, gut. Gut is your instinct. It says that when you look back on your life, 5 years, 10 years from now, what is it that you believe will lead you into the right decision? And then you look back on it and say that, yes, at this fork, I took the right decision. If all of those three are taking you in the same direction, then I think you can have no doubt, or you would, that this is the right way to go. And that doesn't mean that even then every decision will be successful. But at least you applied that test to allow yourself the opportunity to do the right thing. If you find they're pulling you in the wrong, in different directions, and then you've got a turmoil in what is the right thing to do, that is the time to seek external counsel from someone you respect, someone whose advice you value. Again, I must tell you that person will probably be just a good sounding board. Even in the process of discussion, it will be you who will come to the conclusion on what is the right thing to do. Because in the end, it's your life and you must make your decisions. So do rely on your judgment and your intuition when you take these sort of decisions. However, let me now not talk any more about failure. I want to tell you something about the values of Happiest Minds. This is the first public audience in which I'm sharing it. Since I'm yet to create my own team, you might say I've not even shared these within the Happiest Minds team. The values lend themselves to an acronym, which is SMILES, and they stand for sharing, mindful. Mindful is another way of being caring, a different aspect of being caring, integrity, excellence, and social responsibility. Of course, the acronym is a little more in tune also with the fact that the name of the company is Happiest Minds, so they sort of, you might say, resonate with each other. I've already told you about excellence in terms of being accountable, in terms of being action-oriented, always striving to continuously raise the bar. I'll now just speak to you about two of these values, which I believe will have a high impact on fulfilling your potential. One of these is learning, and the other one is social responsibility or giving back, literally as you move forward in your own lives. And let me first talk about learning. I cannot overemphasize the importance of learning, particularly in this knowledge era. Continuous learning is going to be a prerequisite to prevent rapid obsolescence. And with the vast amount of information which is readily accessible now through the internet and the other means, I think the onus for self-development and learning has shifted completely to the individual. You have to always learn new knowledge, new skills, new methods, and ultimately acquire wisdom. And the message I'd like to convey is that you have to take this responsibility for this ongoing continuous learning. This phase of your academics is certainly not the end of your learning, but the beginning of a new phase of continuous learning. And in fact, I would say that when you stop learning, you're dead. The final aspect of fulfilling your potential, which I want to talk to you about, applies to giving back and helping others. This can be achieved through structured social responsibility programs, but of each of us as human beings and as individuals, even just by understanding the other person's needs and supporting their need. When you do that, you maximize your own potential, hear your potential for giving back, while you help others to achieve their own potential. Let me conclude now with another quotation, and this time from the Upanishads. I'm going to step back, but there's another quotation which I do want to share with you. Before I conclude this section on the values, I want to also tell you, to remind you, think about what are your own values. As you enter into organizations, align those behind the values of the organization and be passionate about those values. It is through those values that you will fulfill your own goals of being, again, as I said, a better leader, a better manager, a better human being. And as you step out into the world, I would say do so with self-confidence, do so with a belief that you can make a difference. In the words of one of my favorite authors, Anthony de Mello, he's a Jesuit priest, he says, say to yourself, I am a treasure. Someday, somewhere, someone discovered me. And through that, discover yourself. Finally, in spite of your own best plans, your articulated goals, your future will be influenced by circumstances and forces outside your control. But more than anything else, your future will be molded and determined by what you decide you want to be and your own will to make it happen. So let me conclude with another quotation, this time from the Upanishads. You are what your deep driving desire is. As is your desire, so is your will. As is your will, so is your act. As is your act, so is your destiny. So I'd like to wish all of you success and happiness and hope that each one of you will fulfill your own potential in your lives ahead. Thank you very much. I'll take it from here though if you have a Q&A. But if you want to say something, and I'll come back. And
this is when you are at a managerial or a leadership level. But when we start from a scratch, joining a company as a new employee, the potential, the thing fulfilling your personal potential, the possibility decreases, and we face a lot of problems in it. How do you deal with it to reach the managerial or the leadership level?
Sure. Individual worker, but you're already a part of a team. There will be very few roles that you're going to do which are going to be standalone. So it's not that anybody is ever going to work standalone. What you're really saying is you have to develop yourself into a position in the hierarchy, and you'll be surprised how quickly that will come, where you will have teams reporting into you. There may be teams which could be a different size. Somebody may lead a team of 4 people, somebody may lead a team of 50 people, and as you go further in your career, maybe hundreds and thousands of people. But that's the beginning of the journey. You have to begin your journey as an individual whose individual contribution is being measured as being very key, and that determines what that person's own ability is to deliver. In fact, the challenge is perhaps the other way around. Sometimes the highest individual performers don't realize how much more they can get when they leverage the output of their teams. But they don't realize that that is actually the most valuable output and not your own. And they are not able to transition enough from being, in a sense, leaders of the team as distinct from individual performers. It was one of the best advices I got in the early stages of my career from one of my first bosses. He said, your own personal output is so high, but you are not realizing now at this stage, are you going to transition as you build into teams to see how you can multiply that output many-fold by being able to get the best out of your team. So it's not difficult, that's just the logical beginning of the journey. It's not that the odds are stacked against you, because everybody has to make a beginning. Let's get the next question. And you should caution. India has become and established itself as a major leader in this industry. Today the IT industry is a $60 billion industry out of India. It's really incredible, of which maybe something like 75% of that is really export oriented, and now the Indian IT industry itself has grown to become a very large, maybe it may be 80-20 even today. The industry, in spite of being a $60 billion industry, is still growing at the rate of about close to 20%. Previous 2 years were a little slow because of the global recession, but now markets are clearly picking up. There's a lot of optimism back. There's still pockets in the world which are struggling, certain countries in Europe, etc. But you could say that the global economic recovery has begun. And when an industry like that grows at the rate of 20%, that means it's really creating hundreds of thousands of jobs every year. So the opportunity is enormous. The industry itself, I think, is in continuous search for people. And in reality, you might say many times, the growth of the industry has been constrained by the availability of people. So the jobs are available. Sometimes somebody may come in and say as a fresher that the opportunities are not as good. Fortunately, you're not in that position. That happened in the year 2009-10. It happened in the previous global recession around shortly after the dot-com bust came. In 1999, there was a dot-com boom when we began Mindtree. But it was only a year old when the dot-com bust came. And then there were 2 years when there was hardly any hiring from campus. Those batches are the ones which really then suffered because there was no new input. They virtually had to wait till maybe 2 years later when hiring resumed. And by then they found that there were other people who just literally finished college, actually more in touch with their education, who came into the workforce along with them. But those are very rare times when that happens. I mean, luckily for you, you will be entering the market when there's another upswing. And all I would say is that I can just see a dearth of jobs. Everybody will be hiring. Certainly now coming down to, you said something about Wipro, I never quite understood what that point was. If you want, you can clarify it. The point regarding, again, it's a company which is growing. It's gone through a little bit of a churn at the management levels. These are all people I knew. They grew up, really frankly, as parts of my team. But these things happen within organizations. That doesn't mean that the organization is not going to grow. It's obviously charting out a new strategy for itself. At Happiest Minds, as I said, we haven't actually launched the company. The intention is to launch it in September. At that stage, we will launch it with, I'd say, a decent-sized team already, but campus hiring, I would imagine we will get into next year's cycles. Because at this stage, when we come on, I'd obviously bring on people with experience to be able to start delivering for customers with immediate effect. Put in training programs to bring in campus batches in the next year. I don't know in which month of the year do you all typically hire for people come over to the campus? It starts from January. For the year, which is that same year of 2012, you'll be hiring people who come to, for 2013, people will come in Jan. So maybe that would be around the time. For 2013, certainly maybe a company like Happiest Minds, where we're just starting, may start visiting the campus next year. But not this year, because we're too late for that cycle to start with.
Okay, sir. So we can look the job opportunities for the life science department in your company, sir.
Yeah, well, you know, we don't really have a life sciences business, but in IT you need people with all skills. So maybe
says, and this thing says fulfilling your personal potential, and I would like to know what this thing contradicts what stretching your ambitions, right?
I'm not sure why you see a contradiction.
Stretching your ambitions, won't you deviate from the main path, right?
Well, I don't see I'm happy to be really, I'm not necessarily, you know, aiming for the top of any organization is not everybody's cup of tea. There's stresses involved, there's strains involved, and you're also going to be aware that everybody's got their own strengths, weaknesses, and so on. People may want to work in completely different fields. So what this is merely saying is that, in a sense, what is your deep driving desire for yourself? When you're clear about that, it goes back to the whole point about self-awareness. You should be aware of what you want, you should be passionate about what you want, and that is what you will then become. And therefore, this is linked with that. And where you set that ambition level of goal, again, is an individual decision.
To be frank, till my first year of my master's, I had thought about being in the corporate line. But as the first year passed away, I changed my mind to become the civil service. I'm doing a civil service.
Sure. So that's your deep driving desire at the moment.
Yes.
Okay.
And later on, if I keep changing my ambitions, will that be a problem? Is that right? So,
well, no, not at all. In fact, one of the points I've actually told you is keep your own ambitions and keep resetting your dreams. You may ask yourself and you may re-examine and say, maybe this is something else I want to do. Now, I'll just give you a fit on my own career. I began my jobs by going into the most glamorous job that existed in the country at that time. I went through 7 interviews. It was an oil company, but it was a multinational oil company. And then I realized very soon there was zero challenge. So it didn't matter to me that I had a huge salary. In my first year, I was given a car, which was unbelievable in those days. Today, youngsters can aspire to cars within 2-3 years of working. And I decided to leave the company. I was actually preparing for my IAS exams, but at the same time I had applied for the Senior Management Training Scheme at DCM, and I got the job, and they said I must join in the same week that I had to do the IAS exam. Now, it was a call I had to take at that stage. I'd been preparing. I had either to say I'd throw that effort away, and it's not ever thrown, it's learning. I mean, for me, every one of the subjects I studied was learning. But I was clear at this stage that this job presented maybe greater opportunities for my skills. It fitted into what I saw were my capabilities and what I thought I'd be able to achieve, and the challenges arising. And then maybe 20 years after doing hardcore engineering, I shifted into information technology. So you do keep changing your thoughts and ideas as new opportunities emerge. So none of this is self-contradictory. The important thing is to do this in a way that you're applying 2-3 principles, I would say. A principle of self-awareness, understanding what you are, what is it that is going to do this thing, and apply that in the context of using your head, your heart, and your gut. These young ladies here had a question, I think.
I'm Karen from the MBA department. So I just want to ask you, what is the story behind the start of Happiest Minds? And also, why the name Happiest Minds?
Yeah, sure. See, I'll tell you the story behind the start of Happiest Minds is an unusual one. I don't know what I should... it appears to be one of the mysteries of the IT scene today, and there have been a lot of churn in the IT industry of late. But as some of my colleagues like Som Mittal, who's the current president of NASSCOM, which is the industry association, he's also been a part of my own team in my Wipro days. So virtually almost everybody you see now are people who have one form or the other at one time perhaps worked as parts of my team in Wipro. Now, I'll step back a little further in terms of saying the Wipro to the Mindtree transition in itself. After all, I had led the company for 15 years. It was extraordinarily successful. I thoroughly enjoyed the job. I had a wonderful relationship with my chairman. But I had an unfulfilled desire to be an entrepreneur. Now, when I talked about self-awareness, I'd also talked to you about one author called, who I said had Father Anthony DeMello, and I made a quotation from him. You know, there is a book which has influenced me in my life far more than anything else, and that's a book called Wellsprings. It's a book of spiritual exercises. In that book, the very first exercise is called the conclusion, and it says you imagine that you are dead and your life goes back in front of you, and you ask yourself, what is it that gave you happiness? What is it that you believe you should have done differently? You ask yourself, what are your unfulfilled desires? Now, I did this exercise on a very quiet vacation where there was very little to do except to do some snorkeling and walking around a beach. And when I wrote my unfulfilled desires, there were two of them. One was to be an entrepreneur, and the other one was to write a book which would have a global impact. Now, what happened was, I did this exercise many years ago, maybe around early 90, but I kept revisiting the exercise. So it reinforced to me that that was the truth for me. In a sense, that was my ambition. That was my deep driving desire. And therefore, even sooner rather than later, sometimes you should do it, but sometimes later rather than sooner rather than not doing it at all. And therefore, in 1999, I was 56 years old when I began Mindtree. So, you could say because I kept that truth to myself, I kept asking myself what is it I want to be, I didn't forget it. And so I became what I'll call as a late stage entrepreneur. You can have early stage entrepreneurs, you have middle stage, and I became a late stage entrepreneur. I've now led Mindtree for 11 years, and therefore what is very difficult to understand, and people don't quite understand, in fact, I would myself have said it is inexplicable. There were 10 co-founders. I led the team, I kept all 10 together for 10 years. So it's very unusual for, if you'd asked anybody who would be the last of the co-founders to ever want to leave, would have been me. If you'd asked me that on a certain date, and I can tell you before 1st September of last year, I would have said you're crazy. But then something unusual happened. I therefore then felt that I was not going to get, and I'm making a joy and happiness in working with the team which I had helped to put together, for whatever reasons. And that is what I have externally announced as saying, and I don't want to, as being personal reasons. So there's often a lot of speculation on what it was, why, but then I chose to set out. And what I'm doing through Happiest Minds is to complete an unfulfilled dream, a dream which was still in progress, of creating a great company. And that's why this is a new journey, in effect, has begun, but in a new environment which I'm going to launch. And it's unusual it happened, but I have no grouses against anybody, because now I thank the people whose actions moved me into this and said, I was a late-stage entrepreneur, now I've become a late-stage serial entrepreneur. So that's thanks to them. And why happiest? You know, it's a subject on which I do a lot of thinking and reading. I focused on, somebody asked me what is the sort of books you read, and I realized that the maximum number of books I've read in the last year or two would have been on happiness. I asked you all a question, what is the purpose and objective of your life? If you were to ask me that question, I would say I've got two objectives. One, I think, is that happiness, and I believe that should be the goal of all our lives. Pursue happiness rather than success, and success will follow. The second one for me is to fulfill my own potential while helping others to do it. So if you look back on it, perhaps it is not surprising that I really launched on this name of Happiest Minds. It also stems from another belief, that happiest people lead to happiest customers. When you do this in an environment, I think you'll find that you're spreading your joy from the team to the customers in terms of what we're doing for them.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Charles. So you're talking about success and happiness. I have a question about success. The people say that success often creates more enemies than friends because of ego and other things. So how do you overcome this threat, sir?
You know, I don't actually believe some of these. I think sometimes people feel that the world is always against you, that people are always jealous, people are going to do this. My belief is that 99% of human nature is very good. Maybe I'm over optimistic about that. Certainly I can tell you that I grew through a career with zero conflict with almost anybody. What happened in terms of my taking a very extreme decision was a very extreme, unusual thing which happened. And frankly, it is very difficult to explain. But it would be very sad if that sort of a thing were to make me lose my own faith in human nature. And I believe that likewise should you. I mean, I think people go ahead and achieve. If you achieve things with the best means, you never compromise on the means to achieve your end. You know that you've lived your life with the highest standards of integrity. You've lived your life with not pulling anybody else down. And I mentioned here when I went through that you've got to be clear that you don't need to win at the cost of anybody else. There's enough opportunity for everybody. So you find your own level, your own appropriate level, and if you succeed, and you do it in a collaborative environment of sharing with others, sharing again is a very important thing. It's about how you increase the total pie for everybody. When you share knowledge, you share your... And when you're doing that in a collaborative environment, why should anybody try to pull you down? So I don't believe that... again, these are fearful attitudes when you raise a question like that. And I'd say that drive that question out of your mind. First achieve your success, then even then perhaps worry about it. So look at it. Human nature is really not a negative thing of that sort. Because when you say other people do this, you could ask yourself, would I do it? And if you say, no, I would not do it, why do you think that others would?
Morning, sir. I'm in the Department of NCA. Sir, there was an article stating like the captain of the ship left the sinking ship alone. This was when you quit Mindtree. So what made you quit Mindtree?
You know, I've explained that to people. Firstly, I just explained that in a context of what was just said. Firstly, to start with, you can have one thing about the internet is very useful, but the amount of, let us say, uninformed comments that you get on it also is quite amazing, because people will come to a conclusion. But here it's not just the internet, because it's something that people couldn't understand, that it led to speculation on the reasons. I have chosen to say that the reasons are personal reasons. I took a very unusual way in which I resigned. I didn't even wait for the board to accept my resignation, and I set it out. And there were reasons again for that. There were good corporate governance reasons for that. One, I wanted it to be known that it was irrevocable. I didn't want it to be this thing. Two, I was making a statement clear upfront that I was going to start another company in the same space. It doesn't mean that I necessarily compete only against the old company. I'm in a space, I compete against any other IT company. Now, having done that, I also knew that the person who's going to get hurt the most was me myself. The share prices dropped. In fact, they dropped much more than I expected them to do. They dropped 30%. They will gradually recover because the share price is not a function of an individual, but a team and the results that you deliver. But at the same time, I could not have made a statement that I'm going to go out, get a very nice sanitized statement, sell my shares. I still remain the largest shareholder of the company, by the way, because I've not sold my shares. I have to wait for them to recover somewhat before I do it. Now, in terms of somebody saying a sinking ship, it's such an absurd, stupid statement. Here is a company which has grown like no other company has grown in the last 11 years. It has grown to become a $340 million run rate. It has, actually, if you look at it in the time of the dot-com boom, you see, it is these changes of technology become a great point for the entry of new companies into an industry. Fortunately, there's another set of changes which become my entry strategy, but that's a separate issue which I don't want to touch on. I'm going to complete the answer to your question. So in 1999, do you know how many companies globally entered the internet space? I can tell you 50 companies in America and 50 companies in India which started in that space. They were almost all led by industry experienced people. Companies like Cyient and Viant in the US, companies like Cambridge Technology Partners, and so on and so forth. Not one of them survived on its own steam and went on to become a public company. So Mindtree is the exception. So Mindtree is certainly doing well. 2009-10 was the 10th year of the company. It was the 10th year of continuous growth. It was a year in which the growth was minimal, but the whole industry was at a standstill. There was no global growth. So you don't grow into this thing. The year that we've just closed, the company grew 22%. So where was if somebody uses a phrase like sinking ship, that person has either not looked at the numbers, is completely out of his mind, or is making an uninformed comment. I left the company for a very personal reason. That personal reason is between me and some of my co-founders. I have chosen not to do it because I'm not wanting to embarrass somebody. Something happened, it made me exceedingly unhappy. I had worked with these people like a family for 11 years, and then I felt I could not get joy and happiness working with them. And that's basically it, and then I set out, and as I answered here, to complete an unfulfilled dream in a new environment.
Good morning, Dr. Sir.
Beg your pardon?
Good afternoon, I'm from Department of Commerce.
Yeah.
And my basic question is like, entrepreneurship is all about thinking out of the box. This really the society or the environment around us will support our thinking. As a practical man, what do you think? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure I totally got your question. I got the first part which said entrepreneurship is like thinking out of the box. What is the next part?
Yeah, really the society will appreciate or recognize accepts our thinkings.
Yeah, well, you know, different people contribute in different ways. And I think each one has got to say what is the best way for me to contribute. It's not that any one form of a person is better or superior or inferior to the other, choosing depending on your profession. After all, the noblest of professions is really education. So people who choose to do that, obviously there's less money in it, but you are straight away from your life giving back to others. So do you choose to be an entrepreneur? I think to my mind is not whether society will appreciate. I think in every role you have an opportunity to give back. And if you choose that as your objective, you could say that you're being able to choose that, follow that through, and it will get appreciated. I mean, you're not doing it because you want recognition, but as you do it, of course, the appreciation will follow. And you can do that in a managerial role, you can do it in an entrepreneurial role. I think that has to be built into your philosophy. That's why, for example, I would say that we built it into the values in terms of social responsibility. We did it in Mindtree. And of course, I've included it at Happiest Minds.
Good morning, sir. My question is also related to entrepreneurship. My question is, my uncle Vijay Paudel was also the student of IIT Roorkee, batch of 1985. And sir, you as a student of IIT Roorkee also went to establish a successful company like Mindtree and now Happiest Minds. So my question is why the students of IITs and IIMs make very good leaders and entrepreneurs while the others don't? What is that makes them different?
Yeah, I don't think it's narrowly preserved to the IITs and IIMs. I must tell you that. And for whatever it's worth, when I studied in Roorkee, it was not an IIT, so it was University of Roorkee, and I never went to an IIM, though I did go many years later to the Asian Institute of Management in the Philippines. I don't think, obviously those institutes, you might say, because it's a chicken and an egg issue here. Is it that they churned out the better things because of what they are? Or was the fact that in turn they really did attract the best students? Because one way or the other there's a huge cutoff, and it continues to amaze me. My nephews just got into IIM Ahmedabad, and then I'm amazed at the sort of cutoff scores. He failed in the effort to get in the previous 2 years. And that time he used to have scores of something like 98 point whatever %, and that was apparently below the cutoff. So obviously they set a very high standard in terms of hiring, and to that extent they may get in the best talent. Now, having said that, I believe that talent actually flowers at different times in different ways. People who get into these institutes are not necessarily the only ones who are going to go and make an impact on the world. I think across in every strata of society, some of the best entrepreneurs I know have never actually been through any of those institutions. They went through, and then they picked up capabilities as they went along, and they could have risen to different levels in their organizations. Because, at the time, let's say somebody has flowered at the age of 19 when the admissions were going on for those institutions, and gotten into that. Somebody else has not gotten in, but that person is continuously developing themselves, or him or herself. And then 2-3 years later, that person has really been able to actually perhaps glean and develop him or herself even more in another environment than somebody in that environment. There's another thing I can tell you which happens, and that's a big danger in some of these institutes. I've seen it happening all around. Let's say almost everybody who got into IIM Ahmedabad might have been the top of their class in schools around the country, okay? But they're used to being toppers. It leads a lot to their own feeling of self-esteem. Now, only one of those is going to be a topper out of their class of 200. Somebody who was a topper somewhere else is going to find themselves in the middle of that class. Somebody who's been a topper suddenly finds themselves in the bottom 1/4. It is amazing how much it destroys their feeling of self-esteem. So sometimes you may be in a different environment where you're able to shine out that much more. It builds on the fact that within this environment I'm the best, or amongst the best, and which each of us strives to be. And there's no reason why when I go out into the world, I should see myself as a disadvantage compared to anybody who came from one of those institutes.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Ranjit from the MBA department. Well, I have a question. What are the employability factors that we as students should develop to be corporate ready, sir?
I didn't get you. What are the what factors?
Employability factors.
Okay.
That we should develop to be corporate ready.
Into your training, did you say? I would really say that your training is probably, I have no idea what your academic syllabus is, but if I keep all of that aside, and from what I understand, you're in a very good fortunate position that almost all of you who are interested and want to take on a job are getting offers when you get into the, even before you pass out. That's a wonderful situation. There's a dangerous situation that sometimes in that process you got an offer, you begin to neglect your studies, because that should never happen. So I'm already done that, so I'm thinking about the future. That's a separate phase of your life. But there are aspects to this, and I think to my mind, when you, perhaps one of the best things to be able to get across, in addition to your knowledge and skills that you've acquired, is to convey this feeling that as far as you're concerned, you're on a continuous path for learning and self-development. That this is just the beginning, that you're hungry for further development, you're going to look for whatever opportunities are concerned, and areas which actually provide to your learning and knowledge are more interest to you, perhaps than something which is paying you a lot more in terms of salary at times. That's one aspect. The second is, I would actually tell you, and I've seen this from the time going all the way back to the time I joined DCM, and I'm talking the beginning of my career, and we had group discussions. You know, when it is even in those sessions that people immediately realize who's going to be a good team worker. Sometimes a very eloquent person, somebody who's got the gift of the gab, but doesn't give other people a chance, so immediately criticizes what somebody else is saying, is the one who really comes out as being the negative, and in spite of those abilities, sometimes actually disqualifies him or herself. So see that you're working in the team. Perhaps encourage even in that, even though you may be seeing yourself as competing for a given slot, and it's not necessarily so. You're actually helping people in that same team to come up and maybe build on the arguments of the other person, rather than trying to take an opposing stand. Because then it looks like this is a confrontationist person, rather than a collaborative person. So maybe that's just a brief thought that you could think of. Great, nice questions, and thank you. It's a wonderful thing to be in your institute, and I can see that all of you do have wonderful careers ahead, so all the best.